Well, I want to talk about, the big fear out there is like global domination, a new world order. And that's not fake. There is like this conspiracy, if you want to call it that way. But how long has it been around? A lot of people talk about, since, I don't know, the JFK assassination or whatever. It's been around a lot longer than that. And I know you can go back into history, back to Bavaria when the Illuminati were, caught by the Bavarian police. You can go back even further than that. But just say United States in more recent times, let's go back 100 years. We know about 1913 on December 24th in Eve that the Federal Reserve Act was passed because it wouldn't get under that much scrutiny because most people were, gone recess for holidays. And it was also the Panic of 1907, helped bring this about, bring the legislation about. So they pushed it through on Christmas Eve. And then the United States got involved in World War II, not that much further thereafter. And we know about Woodrow Wilson, who was basically, I think he was a Princeton University president, very intelligent man. Supposedly, allegedly, he had an affair with somebody in Princeton, so they had a way of keeping that over on him so he'd stay in line. But basically, later on, he wrote that he got used big time. And if you know, during the latter part of his administration, he actually was so sick, and some conspiratorial people say he was poisoned. He was so sick, his wife was running a lot of things in the White House. He wasn't running. It was actually Colonel Mandel House, who was neither a colonel or anything else. He was basically, I think, an agent for Bernard Baruch. He was a very powerful man, I think, up to the 60s. But the League of Nations never got ratified by the Senate because a lot of people realized that the treaty powers of the United States could be interpreted. They don't necessarily have to be interpreted this way, but they will be interpreted, actually, though, by the powers that be, as the law of the land. So they didn't like that, so they balked at signing on. But how long has the United Nations been on the drawing board? Actually, a long time. I don't have it here, but if you go back into the January 1941 edition of National Geographic, you will see a page on it that references the United Nations UNO forces, United Nations Organization forces against the Japanese in the Pacific. That was put in a publication, immediately because, it was the January 1942 publication, and it was December 7th, 1941 that we had Pearl Harbor. So, actually, the United Nations was in the drawing boards in the 30s. And two of the presidents in our United States that actually have been one of the best presidents going, Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge. In history books, they're made to look like do-nothing presidents, ho-hum administrations, and all that stuff. Actually, they undid a lot of the damage that happened during the Woodrow Wilson administration, which Woodrow Wilson was actually being used by the banksters, per se. And that's why we had such prosperity in the 20s. Then enter Herbert Hoover later, and that's when we had the crash in 1929. Actually, 32 was actually the bigger crash. But the thing is, world domination has been on the books, in the plans for a long period of time. And it's almost like you have to constantly keep the pressure on them, and people just can't sit back and just say, oh, it's not going to happen. Actually, it hasn't happened. Actually, I don't think it's going to happen that quick anyway. It's going to take a while, probably. And sometimes the drama freaks work against themselves by getting everybody all hyped up. I mean, it's almost like being in a dangerous area, and you're always constantly hyped up on shit. You just get burned out. It's stupid. So you don't want to have that kind of mentality, because this has been going on a long time. Now, maybe things are getting a lot more critical now, but it's been going on for a long time. Not to say that you shouldn't ignore it, because, times of absolute boredom or nothing's going on, it can be interrupted by crazy events that happen all at once. And that's pretty much how they do it, because it's all about shocking you into something, just like the JFK assassination, 9/11, and that type of stuff. But actually, world global domination has been in the play for a long period of time. So actually, the way to combat that the most, though, is to diffuse the power of government as much as possible. George Washington ways, because the only way they need the money. They need to pay somebody to enforce the global domination. In other words, that's probably the reason I say that, maybe the U.S. dollar may not ever fall, because they're probably, or something's not going to, the currencies aren't going to fall themselves, because they need them to stay up. In other words, to pay people to enforce the laws of the government, which are actually being pushed by the elite for their own benefits. It's not government of the people, by the people, for the people. It's government for the elite, by the elite, for the elite. That's the problem. That's always been the age-old problem. And, that's really what the enforcement arm of global domination is going to be. It's actually going to be the government itself. But it's been going on a long time. Actually, like I said, the United Nations organization, if you want proof how long it's, I know it's been on the drawing boards in the 1930s, but actually if you want proof, if you look back in the National Geographic from January 1942, which was put out, immediately after Pearl Harbor, they were already referencing, on a chart and a graph, the United Nations organization forces against the Japanese and how it'll play out. They were calling it that. It actually didn't happen during the Korean War. The Korean War, it's like if you look at major media, they say, oh, the Korean War was when they started talking about the U.S. was fighting under the United Nations. No, actually, but I guess they downplayed that a little bit more, like later on, because people wouldn't bite into it as much. You know what I mean? They wouldn't fire people up to fight for their country versus the United Nations. They would fight for USA, but they wouldn't fight for the United Nations. So they downplayed it, but actually it was let out of the bag when you saw that publication in January 1942, where it actually stated it right on the chart about United Nations organization forces going against the Japanese. So the plans for the League of Nations have actually been, preceded the United Nations, and actually it's been thought up, I guess you could say, all from the 1900s on. This global domination plan has been in place, and I know it goes back further than that, but in modern times, it's affecting us today. I guess you could say, somewhere before 1913 is when it really started. So, also, just to throw you a couple tidbits out there, not everybody that's a politician is like 100% bad. Even, you could say somebody like Dwight D. Eisenhower or something. He told us about, beware of the military-industrial complex. But, he was a real team player all the way, and he knew how to market himself very well. He actually got in good with, talking with Churchill when he was over there, also with FDR's daughter, talking with her and stuff like that. So he went from a lieutenant colonel, light colonel, to a 5-star general in like a rocket ship without any combat experience at all, because he's a good politician. He was a politician in the green uniform. But then he also lets the cat out of the bag on his farewell speeches too, about the military-industrial complex. So you have to take the good and the bad, and even the bad people or the people that you don't like or whatever the hell it is. You gotta look at it that way, because they will drop some dimes. Because usually the people that are out there that are the talking heads, that are like being pushed by the ones behind the scenes and stuff, and they do whatever they want, the money wants, they will actually drop some dimes. So you got to look at it very carefully, actually, how it's going to work out. The 1930s, the Depression was basically planned, and if you look at FDR, that whole deal with his New Deal was basically communism, socialism to the max. But fortunately, at that time, we had a really good Supreme Court that actually knocked out a lot of that stuff, because otherwise it would have been, it was actually the Federal Reserve tightening up money that screwed things up. So, You know, today we can look at Bernanke and actually say he's a bad guy, but you know, in a way, I don't know, maybe he's a good guy and a bad guy. How's that? Maybe that's what he is. Because if we had the policies of the way the Federal Reserve was in the 1930s, we'd probably be way more screwed up than we are today. And but you know, I think Bernanke actually is pumping a lot of money into the system at the very top people. So that's really what's going on too. So he basically is a bad guy, definitely. But you know, going back to the sound money is part of the equation. But the only way you can go back to sound money is if people are actually totally off the government grain doll, and they will produce themselves and use that money as exchange. In other words, silver and gold. Thing is, most people in the United States are not doing that, and that herein lies the problem. So, what I expect though in long range is those type of people, the Illuminati or whatever the hell it is you want to call them, the elite or whatever the hell it is, they ain't gonna have no use for those people at all, none at one point in time, and they're just gonna get rid of them. That's what I think is gonna happen. They, you know, because you know they're useful because they're pushing policy right now. You know, the people that are actually on the grain doll, but when it comes time to change, and they want to go lean and mean with 500 million population in the world, that's their goal. They want 500 million population in the world that's producing stuff for them. That's their intention. That's their fat egos think is going to happen. They're going to get rid of the rest of them. They're only going to take the cream of the crop and get rid of the rest. So, but those type of people that are like that, accepting lots of money off the government grain dole, actually, they will never do a damn thing to fight against the elite. Not in a million years. That's just how they are, man. They only worry about right now, and they don't give a shit about what's going to happen even a day from now or a week from now. That's exactly how they are. So the minority is actually going to have to make the difference. And if you look back at George Washington's times when he had the Revolution of 1776, it was only 3% of the population that actually was the revolutionaries. You look in the Newark, New Jersey cops, they got in trouble for doing this, but some of them were wearing 3%er patches because there were a few of them that were totally dedicated to the Constitution of the United States of America. And that's why they wore that 3% patch. So, the Constitution of the United States of America, especially the Bill of Rights, is the thing you want to uphold the most. And this game of global domination, it's been around a lot longer than you think. So you don't want to be running around like not ignoring it, but then again, you don't want to be like a constant drama-filled worrywart, like people that AJ seems to appeal to, because basically you're going to burn yourself out on BS, and it's stupid. You know what I mean? It's almost like you're in a battle zone, and something could happen. You need to be vigilant. You got to watch out for stuff. But you can't be like trying to keep your adrenaline on full tilt every single minute of the day, because overall you're going to make more mistakes. And even somebody I don't respect, actually LW, Pastor LW, he said something which I agree. Fear actually makes you make stupid decisions. So if you are, sometimes these people are pumping out all this stuff about the New World Order left and right because they're making money off it. Some people make a lot of money off it. Like the guy from the UK talks about the lizard people. I think he's a freaking kook, okay? But he gets in front of an audience and it's like he rakes in money like crazy, talking bullshit about the lizard people. And I don't understand it, but that's what he does. And they're not helping anything. It's really simple. You don't want too much government, so you want to make sure the government gets less money, right? They can go print the damn toilet paper or whatever the hell it is. The other game is too, they're shrewd, these guys, because the other game is, more than money is food. And when you're looking at Syngenta and Monsanto and DuPont and all these other joints, they are playing a game because pretty soon they're going to have it where they own all the food supplies too. So, you want to actually fight them in a calm way, but on different levels, not just with the silver, but also with food, and also spreading the word. But when you spread the word, be calm about it, be chill, and a lot of times it's like throwing a gem at a freaking idiot. You don't want to even bother telling them too much. You know what I mean? It's like they'll stand there and go, I found this out because, it's like they sound like they're interested, but they're not. They're not. So don't even waste your breath on it and chill out, because be more concerned about your own stuff, but at the same time, don't worry about it too much, because you don't know when something's going to happen. And you don't know, did anybody really know when if JFK was going to be assassinated, or if they were going to, have 911 or whatever was going to happen? Nah, they don't know. You don't know. AJ just plays to fear. He's a guy to avoid. But, the basic principles are there. The basic principles are stick with the Bill of Rights. And this global domination crap has been around a lot longer than you think. Before AJ was born, okay? Before LW was born, too. And he's a pretty old fossil. So, just chill out. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen overnight. But if an event happens, all these jerks are going to come out of woodwork, and you're going to freaking, that's they're in business for that shit. That's what they do. They're in business for it. It's stupid, okay? So, be vigilant, but don't be like constantly on edge and worrying about shit.